All right, good evening, and welcome to the Senior Parent and Guardian Night for this year. I'm Dana Plunkett, Director of Counseling, and joining me this evening from members of the department is Will Grannon and Katrina Martin, as well as panelists from the admissions offices of Harvey Mudd, Syracuse, and UMass Amherst, and we'll be introducing them in a minute. We're really pleased that you're joining us this evening. The purpose is to help you gain the same information that we've had a wonderful experience in working with your seniors these past couple weeks in helping them with their post-secondary process. Over the past few weeks, we've been meeting with your seniors in small groups and individually to not only give them common information about how to move their post-secondary process forward, but also meeting with them individually about their own personal journey and where they are in the process and what plans they have, so that all of our seniors end this year with a plan for their life after Needham High School. So we're really hopeful and enjoying that opportunity. If you would like to reach out to the school counselors about any concerns or questions you have, you're welcome to do so after this evening with regards to your student. But again, this evening, the whole opportunity to do an overview of the post-secondary process and helping facilitate the applications that your students are in the process of doing right now, so that you and your seniors are on the same page. We know that seniors aren't always the best at communicating all information. So again, this is an opportunity for us to share with you what we've been talking with them about this fall. And once we've done that, and Katrina Martin will lead us through that information, we'll get some words of wisdom from our panelists. Again, Tira Briggs, Vice President of Admissions and Financial Aid from Harvey Mudd, Kenny Zawada from Syracuse University's Associate Director of Admissions, and finally, Rachel Mason from UMass Amherst is the Associate Director of First Year Recruitments. And then finally, we'll close this evening with Q&A. And if you have a question that you'd like to pose to the panelist or a member of the department, you're welcome to put it in the Q&A section. The chat is not where we will answer questions. So again, you can submit your questions to the Q&A, and that's what we'll be drawing from. So again, that's kind of the order of operations this evening. So we hope that you'll find it informative and helpful as we move forward in providing you the information. Again, one of the things that we really emphasize in our department is that this is a very student-centered, student-driven, individualized process. While we give students in small groups general overview information, we really work one-on-one with your student in particular about their own individual journey in making post-secondary plans. There's such a myriad of schools and opportunities out there that we really want students to be encouraged to make a thoughtful process and think of this as not as a end game, but an opportunity for them to move forward in their lives beyond Needham High School in order to really feel like they're making a deliberate decision. As we say, college is not a prize or a trophy, it should be a match. We want our students to feel a sense of accomplishment and success in their next step in their future. So again, our goal is to try to help them find the right match or matches and to kind of enjoy this journey. It's a journey of self-discovery, and the twists and turns are really part of the process, and where students start and where they end this process is usually not the same place if they've been thoughtful and open to all the different options that are out there for them. So again, we really enjoy working with them. The next slide has got just a list of the school counselors, again, by student's last name. So if for any reason you don't know who your student's counselor is, you can take a quick reference to this screen. And again, Mr. Grannon and Ms. Martin are joining us this evening, but all of our counselors are obviously available for you to ask questions of. And again, reach out while we're meeting individually with your seniors. If you would like to have an appointment with your senior or just to have questions, again, we're available to you as well. We enjoy working with families immensely. So just as a frame of reference, who our school counselors are, who are really just relishing meeting with your seniors right now. Then we'll move on, and I'm going to pass this off to Katrina to sort of walk us through the next several slides, and then we'll move on to the panelists. So Katrina.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Dana. As Dana mentioned, there's a lot happening right now in our office and in your seniors' lives. First and foremost, our senior group meetings. So school counselors are either wrapping up or they're done already meeting with seniors in small group sessions. So we have been meeting with seniors on our caseload over the last week or two to disseminate just some general information, our Needham High School process, and some basic college application information. One thing that we've stressed to our students and that we want to stress to you tonight is that we understand and appreciate and value that college is not necessarily the only or right option for your student. While you'll find that tonight we're very much focused on the college process because there's so much detail to share about the timeline, the process, the applications, and such and such. We fully understand that that's not the only or necessarily the right option for you. So we do make it very clear to our students that while we need to take time to explain the nitty-gritty, we absolutely want to meet students where they're at and respect and value their individualized plans. So once these group meetings have wrapped up, or we do share that more general, basic background, big picture information about the college and post-secondary process, we follow up with each student individually to focus in on what their plan is and to really individualize our next steps for them. So we'll talk a little bit about a gap year resource that we have coming up, but for typically about 95% of our students, they will at least submit an application to a 2 or 4 year college. So we're spending some time this fall, certainly into the winter and into the spring, working with students one-on-one, supporting them, not only managing the step, every step-by-step of the college application process, but also helping them to manage stress and the many, mixed feelings that come along with planning for life after high school. This is a big change. We understand it can be overwhelming for some, if not most. And we really like to remind them, as Dana said, to find some fun along the way and to be thoughtful and really explore what is going to bring them joy next and what's going to help them to reach their goals. So we spent quite a bit of time with our seniors working through that this fall, winter, and through the spring. Here we are right now at our senior family night. We're so glad that you decided to join us. I will just mention, I think, Dana, you may have said this too, but this meeting is being recorded. So if at any point you need to log off, we will be sure to share this online. I believe we'll post this on our website after tonight. So if you have friends or your student was not able to make it, we will make this available to you. Okay, another upcoming event, the Tech or Education Collaborative College Fair. This is a great opportunity for students and families who are sort of still in the exploratory phase, maybe building a list of colleges. Waltham High School is hosting it, but certainly available to any student and family of Needham High School. Great chance to connect with and learn about a wide range of colleges, not only in this area, but in other parts of the country. So ask questions, get your name on a mailing list, get some swag from different colleges. Great opportunity, especially if you're working on building a list. The Gap Year Info Night, I touched on this a little bit already. We have more and more students each year actually who are interested in maybe following a less conventional path and are maybe not quite ready for college just yet. And we celebrate that and we value that. So we are, for the first time in a bit, offering and in collaboration with some other local communities, a Gap Year Info Night. I believe it's hosted by J2 Guides. It'll be online. If I'm not mistaken, it'll be webinar style, most likely recorded as well. More info to come about that, but mark your calendar if you or your senior is potentially interested in a gap year experience or an experience away from school for a little bit post-graduation. Mark your calendar for January 10th. And more info to come. Okay. Lastly, college rep visits to Needham High School. This is another amazing opportunity, a unique opportunity. I think we have around 150 representatives from college admissions offices who are registered to visit Needham High School this fall. So this actually began this week. We have admissions reps from all over the country and actually from some international colleges visiting for about 30 minutes at a time every day of the week from now until the middle of November. Another great opportunity for seniors to sign up. They can find a full calendar of events on their SCORE account. They can register there as well. You can see who's registered right now all the way through November. Great opportunity for them to connect with an admissions representative who may or may not be the person who's reading their application. So we really encourage our seniors to do this. Some common questions about this is, when does this happen and where does this happen? This has changed a little bit when, back in the peak COVID days, but all of our rep visits are happening in person. They're happening during the school day and they're located in the cafeteria. The visits are usually between 15 and 30 minutes. It's tricky, especially for students who do not have a study block or free time in their day, but we know that this is important, and we do encourage our seniors to take advantage of this opportunity. So what we've done is we've worked with our grade level office to excuse a student's absence during this time. We really want students to take advantage of this. Great opportunity to connect with a college that maybe you haven't been able to visit. If it's at another part of the country, or you just didn't have time this summer or last spring, head down to the cafeteria. It couldn't be much more convenient. We've shared the process of excusing absences with students. Obviously, we don't want them to take advantage of this, and students are still responsible for making up the work that they've missed during that time, but hugely advantageous resource for our students, and we do want them to take advantage of that. This is a lot to remember, and something that we share with our students as we're going through this information is that we understand that this is overwhelming. What all of the counselors have leaned into is using Google Classroom as a resource for students and for families. If you're not already logged in or invited to your child's Google Classroom, please ask them or ask us. The classroom is a page, and actually, I think we have a screenshot of it. There it is. It's meant to be just sort of a wealth of resources for you. So some examples: if your senior's working on their college essay or supplemental essays, we've got tips and essay support, lots of information about financial aid. We post scholarships here. The slides from tonight, the slides from our senior group meetings are posted there. So please remind your senior and yourselves to access this resource. We put in a lot of time to make this updated, to make this helpful, and we welcome your feedback. If there's something that we're missing or there's something that you can't find, please just reach out. Okay. All right. This is a very similar slide to something that we shared with our seniors this week and last week. What we do here is just break down the difference or the responsibilities of the student through the college application process and the responsibilities of the school counselor. And I want to start with the senior self-reflection. The senior self-reflection is a survey that school counselors have provided or posted on either their SCORE account or Google Classroom. The self-reflection or senior survey is really, really meaningful for school counselors as we write letters of recommendation. We write a letter of recommendation for every senior on our caseload. It's something that we like doing, and it's something that is much more meaningful and authentic and thoughtful when we have context from your student about their interests, their activities, and their goals. So, we've had 3 years now to meet your students and to get to know them, and it's been such a pleasure. And we really want to make sure we're getting it right as we write their letters of recommendation, and that we're remembering the details that might be very important to them. So we ask for you to remind your student, and if there's students on here, to take a look at your SCORE account or your Google Classroom for your counselor, and make sure that you're taking the time to complete that self-reflection. As I mentioned, this is just so helpful for us as we're writing your letter of recommendation. Parents and guardians also have an opportunity to share with us information about your child, your senior, and we very much appreciate that feedback as well. Okay, no surprise, it is the student's responsibility to submit their application for college and all the other fun stuff that comes along with it: essays, supplemental essays, fees. Something that we haven't mentioned on here is fee waivers. We did mention this to students, but if you are, or you think you might be eligible for a fee waiver, we understand that the college application process itself can be quite pricey. Please have your student or let us know if you think you may be eligible for a fee waiver, and we can absolutely help with that confidentially. The transcript request form, this is something that we really spent quite a bit of time nailing down in our senior group meetings. This is a very important part of the process, part of the Needham High School internal process, to ensure that your students documents and school materials are submitted to each of their colleges on time. The transcript request form is a Google form that we've made available to all seniors. This is something that we ask your students to fill out. Takes all of 20, 30 seconds tops. We ask them to fill out this Google form to let us know formally and officially where they're applying. So we ask for students to fill out one Google form, one transcript request form for every college that they're applying to. There's a few questions on the form. First and foremost, the student's name, the name of the college, the application, and a couple of other questions that helps us to ensure that we submit all of their materials on time. We do not miss deadlines in our office as long as we know where the students are applying and what the deadlines are. We ask for students to submit the transcript request form 2 weeks before the application deadline. A big deadline for a lot of our students, typically for early action or early decision colleges, is November 1st. So we're looking at mid-October for students to be submitting these transcript request forms. Okay. Students should be very clear about that, but if they have questions, they can certainly ask us about that. We'll also be reminding them of this in our individual meetings. Okay, financial aid materials. If you have worked with older siblings or students who are already done with college or in college now, you might feel like you have a grasp on the FAFSA, the CSS profile, and other financial aid applications. And what I want to share is that there have been some changes with the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. The CSS profile is an additional and separate application for aid. And there are a number of other financial aid processes, including scholarships and things like that, that will be really helpful for you as students and families to discuss amongst yourselves. The FAFSA will be available in December. This date has changed in the past. In previous years, it was October. Now it is December. So it is the student and family responsibility to complete all financial aid applications. We will be offering a financial aid night in the springtime. It's geared more towards junior families because we do recommend that you submit the FAFSA and other applications before then. As you're working through this process and as students are nailing down their college list, it will be, important to do some research on the college's website to understand their school-specific deadlines. I do highly recommend looking up FAFSA changes, CSS profile changes, if you are someone who's gone through this process before. If you've not been through this process before, this will be a whole new world. Do feel free to reach out to the school counselor for help with this. Once you're logged in, once you get started, it's not so complicated, but it can feel overwhelming if you haven't done it before. Lastly, test scores. This is something our admissions representatives tonight are going to cover. And I think we have a slide about test scores because there have been a lot of changes in this arena as well over the last few years. However, students who are interested and who plan to submit test scores to colleges, we remind you that that is their responsibility to do so. We, as school counselors and Needham High School, do not have access to students' official score reports. So that needs to come from the student. We've shared with students the process for doing so. Test scores are submitted either through the College Board. College Board owns SAT or ACT, their website. Students also have the opportunity to self-report their scores on the Common App or however they're applying to their colleges. All right, moving on over to the counselor responsibilities. Dana mentioned this before. Our philosophy is to meet students where they're at and support students throughout this process from start to finish. As I mentioned in my small group meetings this week, I can almost guarantee that all of my students are in a slightly different place from one another. This is a really fun part of our job, working with students to make sure they get their questions answered and to help them to reach their goals. So we're absolutely here for them, and we're here for you as you work through this process. Another huge responsibility of ours is to submit documents, school documents. So we send the official Needham High School transcript to students' colleges, along with term 1, term 2 report cards or grades. This was something that some students were surprised to learn about earlier in the week, that they do in fact still need to work hard in their term 1 and term 2 so that they can send strong grades to their colleges. Our first term ends, I believe, November 3rd. First term grades are available and are official about a week later. We submit term 1 grades to colleges right around then. Term 2 ends, I believe, at the end of January. So same deal for that. We will also be sending teacher letters of recommendation. Some students have asked about this. It is not the student responsibility to follow up with their teacher or make sure their teacher is done writing their letter of recommendation by the deadline. We will handle that as school counselors. As long as the student has requested a letter of recommendation from their teacher, they're done with that process. We will be sending the teacher letter of recommendation along with the school counselor recommendation. Lastly, in terms of school materials, the school profile. The school profile is a document that we create every year, which provides context to colleges about Needham High School. So colleges are evaluating applications from high schools across the state, across the country, and around different parts of the world. It's challenging for them to compare and contrast students from different high schools. The school profile explains where our students are coming from, explains that Needham High School is a rigorous, very academically challenging high school. We provide information about all the courses that we offer, how our levels work, the difference between college prep, honors, accelerated AP, and information about data and information that we've collected over the years. Okay, I think that's it for that slide. What I'll just say before moving on is just to reiterate that we really encourage and we welcome questions from you and your students every step of the way. I think sometimes students are worried, am I behind or am I missing something? They're not behind. If they're just starting now, that's all right. Please encourage them to access us. That's what we're here for, and that's what we love to do. And now I'll turn it over to our presenters. This is the highlight of our evening. And we are so fortunate to have Tira, Kenny, and Rachel with us. And we'll get started. You all can introduce yourselves and then maybe share some words of wisdom.
Great. Thank you so much, Katrina and Dana. So as Dana mentioned, my name is Tira Briggs, and I'm the Vice President for Admission and Financial Aid at Harvey Mudd College. We are a college in Claremont, California, which is about 40 miles to the east of Los Angeles. I will say I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, and I've been here for 17 years, and I still have trouble remembering the east and west part since I'm so used to everything being west of me. But what I will add is that Harvey Mudd is part of something called the Claremont Colleges. And we are, in fact, the only planned college consortium in the United States. You may have heard of others, for example, what Rachel will be talking about shortly, but we were designed to work together as a consortium from the start. So along with Pomona College, Scripps College, Claremont McKenna, Harvey Mudd, and Pitzer, all together, we make up the Claremont Colleges, about 6,000 undergraduate students total, and about 9,000 students when you add in the graduate schools, but altogether 5 undergraduate colleges located in 1 square mile. So unlike other consortia where you get on a bus and go place to place, you literally just walk across the street and you are on another campus. So students will eat meals at the other colleges, join clubs at the other colleges. They will join different sports teams. We have 2 different sports teams. One is Claremont McKenna, Harvey Mudd, and Scripps, and the other one is Pomona Pitzer. But really the advantage of the consortium is that we give you all of the advantages of a small liberal arts college, never being taught by a teaching assistant or a graduate student, getting to know your faculty members. But because we combine our resources, we give you the resources of a small to mid-sized university. And then very quickly, specifically about Harvey Mudd, each of us brings something different to the consortium. And we are a liberal arts college that only offers majors in math, science, and engineering. So we only offer bachelor's of science degrees. We're looking for students who are excited to study STEM, of course, but we're also looking for students who are equally excited about studying the humanities, social sciences, and the arts in a very collaborative and rigorous environment. So I will stop there and turn it over to Kenny.
Right, thank you. Kenny Sawada, Syracuse University, located in upstate New York. We're a private research institution. A couple of highlights is that we have over 200 majors, a ton of school spirit. We're nationally ranked for our study abroad programs, and our school color is orange. And we are roughly about 4.5 hours from Needham High. And I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you so much. Rachel Mason, Associate Director of First Recruitment at UMass Amherst, also a unapologetically enthusiastic alum of the university. We are a top-ranked public university right here in Massachusetts, offering more than 100 majors and numerous minors for our students. Many of our programs are ranked highly within the New England region, including, of course, engineering, computer science, and nursing, as well as our agricultural program as well. UMass Amherst is known for so many different things. There's lots that we are proud of, but it's really just an amazing institution that gives our students the opportunity to really explore their interests, but also discover new ones, whether that be through double majoring and minoring, study abroad, taking advantage of our 5-college consortium. Thank you so much there. That is available to our students as well. I think one thing that I will end on is that we are particularly proud of our graduation rate, which is 80% of our students graduate within 4 years. So really allowing them that opportunity to then explore their next steps and finish on time. And then, of course, we are so happy that once again, we have been ranked as #1 food in the United States. So this is the 7th year in a row. And for no other reason, come visit us and try out the amazing food we have to offer.
That's fantastic.
Dana, I realize I forgot to do the piece of advice. Would you like us to wait and add that in, or would you like us to do
Well,
that?
I was going to say before we start this, we have some questions that we wanted to ask you directly, but if each of the three of you want to add a piece of advice, but also speak about admissions, particularly with your type of school, a smaller school, a larger university, and a state institution. So to broaden it out and just sort of what are the nuances in admissions in your particular type of school, which is why we always like to represent a wide variety of colleges on this panel. So Tara, we'll start with you.
We'll start with me. Okay.
Smaller.
So yeah, my main piece of advice is for families and students to think about the fact that this next few months is not about you twisting yourself into a pretzel to try to become something that you think the colleges want. There are literally hundreds of colleges out there who want you exactly as you are right now, not having started any clubs or done anything more than you've done right now. So your job over the next couple months is to be thoughtful about finding those schools that think you've made really great decisions. And in terms of our admission process, I think as we talk about this in a bit, we're going to go more into the review. I think you're going to find there's some definite process differences, but I don't think you're going to find a lot of philosophical differences in terms of that we are all looking at a very sort of holistic approach to the application, focusing on every single piece that we require. Yes, we all read everything you send us because there's a reason we're asking for it. I think that, the difference for us is we are a very small school. We are 900 undergrads. And one piece that makes us different is that I have 8 staff members. So I'm guessing that's a slightly smaller staff than Syracuse or UMass. And so every single person on my staff is involved in every single discussion about the students. So that I think is a wrinkle that you may not find at some larger institutions.
Great. Terrific. Kenny, any words of wisdom, but also just kind of admissions in general from a larger university?
Sure, I'll speak to the admissions portion first. Having about 15,000 students, we typically get about 40,000 applications, and we'll have about 40 plus reviewers, some part-time reviewers as well. And we do read by specific school or college within the university. So even though I have visited Needham earlier this week, even though I'm the representative for Massachusetts, I may not necessarily be reading a student's file of the students I met with this week because we review by specific department. So those are a bit of the structural differences with us. And then a piece of advice is that there's more than one path for you to take in college to ultimately get to your goal. For some of you, it might be this straight line, like you want to do architecture and boom, that's what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. But for many, it's going to be this crazy squiggly line to get to ultimately where you want to go. I remember being a high school senior and loving math and sports. And if someone were to tell me, back then that I would be having stints in residence life and financial aid and admissions, I'd be like, I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to be working in sports statistics. So I think all of us can attest, parents out there as well, that it's going to be more of a squiggly line, and that there's going to be more than one path for you to get to ultimately where you want to get to.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Kenny. Rachel, words of wisdom and about just sort of state institutions and their admissions rates and anything you have just in regards to how the state system works, Massachusetts and elsewhere.
Absolutely. Piece of advice. I'm sure that you are hopefully you've already heard the advice that you figure out a day or two a week that is your day to talk about college applications and to not spread it around because it can become there are other things going on for you in your senior year. And so we really want that to be honored. But I would also add to that your process is your own, and it is not one that necessarily needs to be shared with everyone, whether that be friends and family, the person at the grocery store checkout counter. I encourage you to kind of identify the few voices that have experience and want to support you and can really provide some insight. And beyond that, make it a mystery, one that you will happily reveal come May 1st when you have made the decision of where you're going to enroll and put that deposit down. This is not a process that really needs to be to spread out, and it simply adds a lot of stress as well. In terms of state institutions, so for us in Massachusetts, we do need to follow the standards that are set for us by the state guidelines, which are responsible for, among other things, the fact that we have to recalculate everyone's GPA, which we'll talk about a little bit later on there. In terms of the university itself, we are looking at about 50,000 applications to enroll a class of 5,000. What I think is important to note in those numbers is that for many institutions, or it's important to know the difference, is whether or not you are applying to a specific major or if it's an open enrollment process. So when you hear an admissions rate like UMass Amherst has a 51% admissions rate this past year, that actually doesn't tell you a lot. For our more competitive majors, because our students are applying directly to those majors, it could be 20–30%. Whereas, for example, our arts and humanities, the other 80+ majors that are offered could be more in the 60, 70, 80% range. So really get to know the institution and how their admissions process works, whether or not you're applying to the institution itself or to a specific major, and how that impacts the overall admissions rates.
Super. And that's one of the reasons why when we work with our students and we talk about those scattergrams that are on SCORE, we always say take those with sort of a grain of salt, because you're not going to be able to understand when you're looking at those scattergrams the nuances that Rachel just talked about. So that if you're applying to, for instance, a nursing program, that's going to have a lower admit rate than maybe general studies of that same institution. So again, that's why the scattergrams are something that, you know, kind of gets you in the ballpark, but certainly doesn't tell you all of those nuances that are really important to factor in. Thank you, three, for that. We're going to move on to just a few sort of pointed questions that each of our panelists will address individually. So Kenny, we're going to give you the first question, finding the right fit. How do you research if a college is a good fit? And again, some of our students have already begun this process, but in terms of what are some of the things that you can do to suss out a good fit, and how do students demonstrate interest, and is that actually important?
And Dana, can I pause Kenny for one second? Just for the families out there, that if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A as we go, because I can collect them all. And as we get through the next 3 slides and turn it over to an open quick Q&A, that we have some questions there. And that's not just my questions for the panelists. Sorry about that, Kenny.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, so we'll talk about fit. I mean, for me, I think there can be a variety of definitions, but I feel like an academic fit, a social fit, and a financial fit can be our overarching focuses, making sure that a college is a fit for you on various levels. And the research can be done by, you know, what's been listed here, the obvious, like in-person tours. We talked about the college fair, the tech fair that's being held on October 3rd that you can attend. When a college or university visits Needham High in the cafeteria, that can be another way to research. So just making sure that I think one I went through this as a first gen high school senior, whose parents were from Japan and didn't go to college, of just kind of listening to some people's advice, like cousin Donnie, who said that Syracuse was too close to home and kind of expensive. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to cross it off my list. And looking back, I wished I had at least looked at SU. I just love everything that Syracuse has to offer. So I hope that you can take a bunch of different resources in your research, and not just take what one person says and running with that. Another thing that's valuable is current students at the university, where you could potentially glean some information when you're on a college campus, or perhaps there are students who've graduated from Needham High who are now attending those schools, and maybe you have those contacts. Maybe your guidance office has those contacts as well and those connections. So researching through them can be a great resource. Some schools may have virtual panels with current students, which can be really helpful. I'll also speak to the college side of it. So colleges have their fits too. And when they're creating a class for the upcoming year, there are certain things that certain colleges may be looking for. One example that I'll give you is for us at Syracuse in our College of Engineering and Computer Science specifically, we're looking to heavily increase and potentially double the number of engineering and computer science students at the university. Why is this? There's a company called Micron, one of the top microchip companies in the country, who's setting a facility in Syracuse, New York. So we're going to need a lot of students who are going to be interning and for jobs to be able to help Micron, and in turn, it will help us as well. So there may be things like that you may not be aware of that colleges are looking for. So there is a fit side of it on the other side of the table as well. And then speaking to demonstrated interest, which is noted on here too. So a lot of these ways where you're researching a school will be demonstrated interest, a way that you are tangibly showing your interest in a school. Not all schools and colleges will utilize demonstrated interest in the admissions process. Okay, so I wanted to make that clear. I think the last percentages that I saw was that half of the colleges across the country took it into account as a factor, whereas others may not. It's not a be-all, end-all. I think demonstrated interest should just naturally happen when you're looking genuinely at the schools that are on your list. But do note that, for example, when I was here at Needham on Monday and having students complete the QR code, that was a way for us to be able to track. If you had attended that session, then that's something that we'll be able to see when we're ultimately reviewing applications. So for us, it is a piece of our process.
Super, thank you very much, Kenny.
Mhm.
Move on to the next slide, evaluating an application. Tira, if you want to take this one, in terms of what is a holistic review process, how, if it varies for different institutions that we've mentioned before, maybe a comment or two on the recent Supreme Court decision and the use of ChatGPT in the admissions process.
So I did use the phrase holistic review, but I don't think it's necessarily clear what that actually means. I think the most important thing for families to know is that we are doing everything we can based on the material we have in front of us to get to know the students who are applying. Excuse me. And that means that, as I mentioned, we're going to read every single piece that a student sends in, or teachers or counselors or whomever. It means that we're trying to shape a class for our institutions rather than just admit individuals. And so we're looking holistically both at an individual application, but holistically at the pool as a whole and about how that class might be coming together. That said, there are very different approaches to doing this. And I think even though technically I'm talking about this slide, I think we're all going to weigh in here because I'm guessing we all do this fairly differently. One of the things I should note for being a small private liberal arts college is that you are applying to the college as a whole. You are not applying to we don't have any specific schools. We do ask you what you are interested in majoring in. And in some cases, if it's one of our most popular majors, that could be a little bit more selective. But the most important thing to know about applying to a liberal arts college is when you get there, you can change your mind. You might think, Kenny's example was perfect. You might think you know what you want to do. We hope a liberal arts education and a college education in general is going to open your mind and help you find new things that you want to study. I do want to very quickly share the way we read at Harvey Mudd, because it is very different from most places in that we use something called committee-based evaluation, or what's known as CBE. So sort of in our world, the most traditional way is individual admission counselors reading an application on their own and often making a recommendation about whether or not the application moves on to a second reader or onto admission committee before a final decision is made. The way we do it at Harvey Mudd, and several colleges are now doing this, we actually read as a partnership. So there are two admission staff members together. One person's reading half the application, the other person's reading the other half, and we're having a constant conversation as we do that. If I'm reading, I do read all of the applications actually for all of New England. And if I'm reading a high school transcript and I see something on there that looks strange, maybe your 10th grade grades weren't as strong as others, I can say to my partner, I'm not sure what happened here. And often my partner will say, I'm looking at their common application right now, and I can see now that there was a death in the family or a divorce or something that understandably would impact a student's grades. The job of the pair is then to recommend whether or not the application moves forward into admission committee. And then from there, as I mentioned, we all come together as one staff to make our final decisions. So that is obviously very different. Before I jump into the Supreme Court and ChatGPT, I wanted to give Kenny and Rachel a chance to talk about how theirs works.
I will jump in first. So we do read by major. So individual counselors are reading specific majors, whether that be nursing or engineering. I myself read what we refer to as the MAD applications: music, art, architecture, and dance, which is a lot of fun. If you have any questions about portfolios or auditions, happy to answer them. We do operate in a single admissions read. So after a file has been GPA, where we recalculate your GPA, and we'll talk some more about that, then the counselor will read and make a recommendation. Because of the volume that we encounter, we're not able to read every application more than once or have an additional read, but we do a lot of what we refer to as a QCing. So we go through and make sure that the counselors are coming to decisions that are consistent with the policies of the holistic read and the attributes that we're looking for.
And for us at Syracuse, it's very similar to what Rachel had mentioned at UMass Amherst, where we're reviewing by school or college. We have an initial read, we do have a second reviewer, and then our committee will convene after that. So multiple levels to our review.
Kira, we'll go back to you for a comment on Supreme Court decision in ChatGPT.
And of course, this is the moment my husband arrives home and the dog gets very excited. So I apologize if there's noise in the background. So the Supreme Court decision, I think that the key thing for families to understand about that Supreme Court decision is that even in the past, when we were allowed to consider race as one of the facts, most places, not all, were allowed to consider race as one of the factors in the admission process, it was not the deciding factor. Race, along with so many other factors and context, is one of the pieces that we consider in terms of reviewing a student's application. So while this is going to be a very different process for many of us, it's not going to be a different approach to holistic admission. We're still going to be focusing very much on a student's identity, but now we just have one fewer piece to consider as we do that. That said, what we are most interested in is a student's context. One of what the Supreme Court told us we couldn't do is in the actual review of applications, we cannot consider race. They did not say we cannot consider race as we are recruiting students. They did not say that we could not consider race once students are admitted and we can make a decision about sort of how we, for our admission speak, how we yield them. So I think colleges right now are still figuring out what their process might look like, but ultimately what students should take away is that they need to figure out what they want to communicate to us. This doesn't mean that every single student needs to run out and put in their essay, and by the way, I am, and insert their race here. If they want to tell a story about their identity in their context, they are welcome to do so in an essay if a college has an essay, something like that. And we still will not use that just as a factor. We will consider that as one piece about student experience, about lived experience. and I've been in front of about 300 counselors over the past few days. And what I heard from them, that there was a concern that people were taking this part of it as, I now need to prove that I have overcome something. And that is not the way this has ever worked. This is more about your identity, regardless of overcoming or not. And that's what we value, and that's what we want to hear about most. Anyone want to add something to that? Okay, cool. And in terms of ChatGPT, this was a fascinating discussion. I was just in San Diego this morning with a bunch of counselors. And all of us, I think, may have slightly different takes here on the role of ChatGPT. Some colleges and universities have already come up with a clear policy statement about how students should use ChatGPT in the admission process. I would recommend, despite the fact that they're big competitors for us, you check out Caltech and Georgia Tech. They both have a very thoughtful ChatGPT policy. But the bottom line is, it's impossible for us to pretend this doesn't exist. It, I believe, can be a resource for students. I can almost guarantee that most admission offices over the summer spent time feeding their essays, their essay prompts into a ChatGPT, something that will tell us what it might look like when they answer our applications with the ChatGPT. What we've seen overall is ChatGPT, for the most part, does a fine job of answering the question. But what you need to know is what is often lacking there. The phrase that we were using this morning was soul. Like, it was the actual personal pieces are not in there. And you should also know that it can make stuff up. So you cannot trust implicitly everything that is coming out of there. My advice, to be honest, I'll say this to counselors too, but my advice to counselors, to students, is use it as a framework if that's what you want to do, but don't let it make decisions for you. Don't let it dictate your voice, because what we're trying to hear in these essays is very much your voice. So we're not going to pretend that it's not going to happen. To be honest, we're not going to pretend that you're not going to use ChatGPT once you get to college, but you have to know how to use it responsibly and make sure the ideas are still your own and the voice is still your own.
Nicely done, Tara. Thank you. Our final question is about the role of standardized testing, and we'll turn this one over to you, Rachel, talking about test optional, test flexible, test blind. Is testing required for merit considerations, special programs? And finally, should students submit and shouldn't they? How should that be decided?
Absolutely. And this is the most honest answer, and sometimes the most frustrating, is it's all going to depend. And that's why it's so important to have a manageable number of institutions that your son or daughter is considering, so that you can find out what the specific policies are for individual institutions. So yes, one of the major changes for the admissions process as a result of COVID was really reevaluating the role of standardized testing in the admissions process. You saw not that these are new ways of considering it, but that many of us were moving away from the testing. The different types of policies that institutions typically have would be, first, requiring it. There are about, I believe, last I heard, somewhere around 5% of institutions do require SAT or ACT scores as part of their application process. Others will have either a test optional or a test blind policy. In terms of test optional, that means exactly what it sounds like. You have the option of submitting your scores. You can decide individually whether or not you want to have that be part of, again, that holistic read that we were talking about earlier, and consider it as part of your application. If you do not submit your scores, the policy of test optional means that we're not going to hold that against you. Honestly, we're not even really going to spend much time thinking about why you didn't submit those scores, because there are so many different reasons. I like to think of it as, a colleague of mine described it, as a pizza, right? The pizza that I think of from the West Coast with the pie slices, not the squares, just saying. And each slice of that pizza is a different part of the application. The essay, the short answers, your transcripts, letters of recommendation, activities. One of those slices could be the testing as well, if you choose to include it. If you take out that slice, it doesn't remain empty. It's not a pizza that is now without a slice. Rather, the other pieces just get bigger to fill it in. So we're not feeling as though we're missing any piece of it. Now, just remember that if you do submit the scores, we are going to see them. We can't unsee them, and they will be considered. Test blind means that the institution won't consider them at all. Even if you send them in, they are not going to be part of your application process. And what we have found when we're looking at the impact of test scores on the acceptance rates and so forth from most, if not all, the institutions I've talked to, is that, and certainly it's true of UMass Amherst, the majority of students for us are not submitting scores. And the majority of students who are accepted did not submit scores. The majority of students who go to the Honors College did not submit scores. It does not impact merit scholarship as well for UMass Amherst. Now, it may differ for other institutions. They may take into consideration test scores for part of merit consideration, or there may be special programs that are required, that do require that testing. So again, that's where it depends, and you need to know your institution as you go forward. So you're applying to a school that is test optional. Now you have to decide, do I submit the score? The first thing I would do is talk to the admissions officers at that institution, right? We can talk to you a little bit more about the nuance. We're not going to tell you whether or not you should submit those scores, but we can definitely help give you the information you need to make a decision. You can also, of course, talk to your guidance counselors. They are a wealth of information and able to help support you in making that decision. Most institutions will provide, as part of their student profile, the average or the mid-50 range for the test scores that they do receive. Again, that can be a little deceptive in that not all students are submitting the scores. They tend to be on the higher end, right? If you got a high score, you're probably going to be submitting it. So that will impact the profile as well. So it does give you a little insight, but I encourage you to tease it out more with the institution itself or with the guidance office.
Super. Thank you, Rachel. With regards to merit consideration and special programs and testing being required for that, can you speak to that for us?
Yes, absolutely. So again, it's going to depend on the institution. But in terms of the test optional, the majority will not be taking those into consideration. It will not impact your likelihood of getting them. That being said, though, that information will be available on the website. So if individuals are concerned or applying to a special program, for example, if they're applying to engineering and so forth, there may be those requirements. So it's important to read the fine print in the application materials.
Super, thank you. First, I want to just thank Kenny and Tira and Rachel for your comments and thoughts so far, answering the questions, but also your overview has been extremely helpful. We're going to move to questions and answers, and Will Grannon is going to help us with that. Again, if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A part of the Zoom, not the chat, please. And we'll either field them from the counselors or the admissions officers, depending on the question. So, Will, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks. And thanks again, panelists, for joining us. And we got some great questions coming in. I'll start with some of these questions on the sheet here, and then we'll go over to the ones that are coming in. I guess one, I think the first two bullet points kind of address the same thing. So Needham High has an unweighted GPA. This class comes in with an unweighted GPA, but we have like leveled classes. And I guess, how do you look at a GPA that comes from a high school, and how do you determine the strength of a student's applicant if something's unweighted? Or maybe Rachel, I don't know if you want to start, because I know you guys recalculate every GPA. Crazy.
It is the least favorite part of the entire application process. It is done painstakingly by hand by an individual. We all have our trusty calculators that we live. I know, isn't that cute? So we do recalculate. So that means that we recalculate all transcripts to be weighted based on the guidelines provided to us by the Commonwealth. If you are curious, you can actually go online. There's a whole little worksheet you can work through to see the number that we're likely to come to. I think what's important to note is that not all courses will be considered. So for example, PE is not going to be part of that weighted GPA. In terms of how we evaluate the transcript, we are looking to see, as part of that big picture of a student, what their interests are, where they challenge themselves, were they taking increasingly challenging courses. We want to see that students are continuing to challenge themselves in their senior year. So for example, we do require a math course in the senior year. And so that even though it's not part of your GPA per se, it is part of what we are looking for in terms of the rigor, but also what we know about our students in terms of how successful they'll be coming to the university. We're not asking for a math class just in the senior year just because. We're asking for it because we know that students who have a senior year math will actually do better in their math courses once they arrive at the university. So all those pieces really are taken into consideration.
Great. Kenny or Terry, do you want to add anything? Or
Sure. Yeah, I'll just say that for us, we'll recalculate to a 4.0 weighted scale for our applicants. And then determining the strength will be through a student's rigor and looking at the school profile. If you recall, our university, we read by school or college. Like Tira probably has Needham High school profile and transcript like down in her head. Whereas I would probably need to go into the school profile, which we get for every applicant, and review that before looking at a student's and assessing a student's rigor.
And for us, we take whatever school gives us, weighted, unweighted, it doesn't matter to us. I have zero idea what Harvey Mudd's average GPA is, because in the span of an hour, I might read, 2 students who are on A through F scale, the other's on a 100-point scale, the other, if it's a international baccalaureate school, is on a 7-point scale. So we just take whatever we're given. No student is at any sort of disadvantage, whether they go to a school that is weighted, unweighted, whatever the scale is. We know you don't have a choice in that. So we focus much more on the context. And the only added wrinkle for Harvey Mudd, given the kind of school that we are, is that we do require that all students before they get to us have already taken a year of calculus, a year of chemistry, and a year of physics. So that's the added level. And it can be at any point in their 9th through 12th grade.
I'd also like
Thanks.
to add a comment about transcripts and school profiles. We often get in the department questions about how many AP classes should a student take, or how many honors or accelerated levels should a student take. And really, that's part of the reason why we provide every school with every applicant's school information with a profile, so that an admissions office can see what is the level of rigor that the school, such as Needham, offers, and then compare it to the classes that the student takes. So if Needham only offered 2 AP classes and the student took 2 AP classes, then they would know that the student took the 2 most rigorous classes in the school. Versus if we have 20 AP classes and a student doesn't take any, then they know that that student hasn't taken the most rigorous profile or programming. So it's really important that they're evaluating students within the context of the institution that the student is attending, not in comparison to another institution, because we all have different classes and different levels and things like that. So that's why we provide that school profile, to put your student in context of Needham High School, to help the admissions office evaluate them as in their strength of application.
Thank
I'll
you.
go back to you, Will.
Yeah, so the other question here, so we have some students who are really ready to apply, and you all have plans that allow students to apply early, whether it's early action or early decision. And there's sometimes a question, even with a November 1 deadline or November 5th deadline, is there an advantage to sending in your application today versus October 28th? Each of you could just briefly say.
For us, there would be no advantage for if you're applying early decision, which is due November 15th, whether you submit it right now versus November 14th. My son's applying early decision. He's a high school senior, and I'd love for him to get his application in right now. But if I'll go at his pace. I'll let him drive the car. So if he submits it November 14th, it'll be fine.
Same is true for Harvey Mudd. We don't pay attention remotely to when an application comes in, as long as it's before the deadline or by the deadline.
Ditto.
Yeah, and just the one other piece. So these are early action, early decision. There are some schools that are rolling admission out there, not these institutions, where applying a bit earlier can be advantageous in the process. There isn't a big difference between like early now and early late October. Those are still very early, for rolling admissions, but that can be a little different twist when institutions are rolling out decisions as they receive them and as they start to fill up parts of their class. Well, great. So we got some other questions that have come in. Touching on what Katrina talked about with Q1 and Q2 grades. So you all have early plans, and often students have applied before Q1 and Q1 grades especially are available. So the question was, one, do we send the transcript? And I can answer that. The transcript goes out to complete the application and other materials by the deadline, whether that's November 1, November 5, November 15. So that goes in often without Q1 grades. So some institutions still require Q1 grades. So we send them when they're available because they're often required to complete the application and review. So it's augmenting an application that has already been submitted. Can each of you touch? I know some will wait for those Q1 grades for every student. Others will make decisions based on what they've already received if the Q1 grades haven't arrived by then. Can you each touch on how you deal with Q1 grades?
Sure. I mean, for us, I think the challenge is not every high school has quarters. And so it's more that we care deeply about having some version of first semester grades before we make a decision for in our case, early decision 2 and regular decision. But that does not mean that early decision 1 students are off the hook. We greatly appreciate having those Q1 grades for schools that have that. But we will review, first semester grades for all of our early decision admits to make sure that they're maintaining the same level of achievement with which they were admitted.
Same with us as well.
So we will evaluate the transcript as it comes to us, whether it contains Q1 or Q2 grades. If it's available, we'll factor that into the recalculated GPA. But if it's not available when the application first arrives, it won't be part of that overall GPA, which is why it is important if a student is on an upward trend, which meaning that perhaps you struggled in your freshman, sophomore year, there was, pandemic, something along those lines, and your grades are now getting better, that you may actually want to consider regular decision as an application timeline rather than early action, so that we are able to take into consideration that first chunk of work that you do, and that can give a boost to your GPA. Typically not a huge one, but it certainly can be a factor, especially if you are establishing that upward trend.
Great, thank you. And some other questions that have come in about is there help to navigate the financial aid process? I can share. As school counselors, we can certainly help. We are not financial aid experts. We know the process, but getting into the details, we would send you in another direction. We often point families, especially in Massachusetts, to MEFA, the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, is a wonderful resource. They've probably handled every question that could be asked regarding someone's financial aid situation. And I know institutions, financial aid offices are great resources for families, and people shouldn't hesitate to reach out. I don't know if any of the panelists want to touch base on that side of it and the support your financial aid office can provide.
I think the only thing I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
No, you first.
The only thing I was going to say is you should never have to pay to get financial aid advice. So everything is out there is free, both on websites and from any of the individual colleges. So that would be my one piece of advice is don't pay for financial aid advice.
Nor to submit the FAFSA, which when you Google it, the first ones that come up are not actually the free. It is titled free for that reason. You also saw my head nodding enthusiastically because we have an amazing financial aid department that answers all the questions that I do not know the answers to. So I am so glad to have such a talented team of professionals backing us up in this process.
Great, thank you. And there were a couple of questions about the college visits, the reps coming to the high school. Like Kenny was here on Monday talking to our students, which was fabulous. So those schedules and where students can register is in their SCORE account. So you can talk to your student about seeing their account. And if you want to see the full list and schedule there, you can also have access to your own score account if you don't already. Invitations went out. Invitations can be resent to get your own score account so you can see the colleges visiting. But definitely talk to your child. They can share it via their score account, and they can actually invite you via their score account for you to get in. So it's all right there. It's a fabulous opportunity. Cafeteria isn't necessarily the best space to have the conversations, maybe, but it's a great opportunity, and students get excused from class to attend them. And we have a process that we talked about in our group meeting about how to do that and how to get that excused absence. There's next question specific for Syracuse. Kenny, can you talk about how Syracuse is evaluating their new dual major applications?
Sure. We have some opportunities for students on the Common App to select dual programs where you'd essentially have a major from two separate schools and colleges within the university. We'll review duals as we have reviewed other duals in the past. So there'll be a representative from a reviewer from one department and a reviewer from the other that a student is applying to through the dual, and making ultimately a joint decision on that. But we do have familiarity with duals as we've had them for years.
Thank you. And there's a question I should have addressed just before, once again, about the visits. The reps come once. So Kenny won't visit Needham High 3 times to catch the kids who didn't make it the first time. But we do have Kenny's contact information, and we have contact and help students find contact information for their representatives at each of these schools. So they are a great resource you can reach out to them. And not every school comes to the high school. So you can look for your rep at different schools on their websites, and that can be a point of contact if you had questions in the process. The next one, so there's a question about a Supreme Court decision for schools. Do schools have quotas for race or any other quotas to form their class? And if yes, why? And if no, I guess no.
Never have, never will. No, we don't work that way. There is some, obviously we're considering, like I've said many times, all of those different pieces, but no, we never go back and say, oh, there aren't enough X. It's much more so, again, shaping a class based on the individual reviews.
Thank you. And so a question about applying. I know a number of students, because Harvey Mudd is technical and you apply to different colleges at the other institutions. Do you prefer, even in that case, seeing an application where a student might have some more direction, maybe even a broad direction about a major, rather than completely undecided? I know some schools you just apply to the school and undecided is an option. How do you look at students with that direction and students who are indicating some undecided?
We are very happy to have students apply undecided. Certainly we're going to honor their request in terms of selecting their major and their alternate major, but we typically see about 6,000 undecided students, and really are happy then to provide them with very specific guidance and advising once they are on campus that is designed to encourage them to take courses in numerous fields and really hone in on what their interests are ultimately.
Great. I'll go to the next one. There's a question more for us about the school profile. School profile is loaded into SCORE. We send it to colleges, and it is available for families, so we can double check if it's visible in SCORE for you, but we can also put that on our website. It may already be on our website. We can put it on our classroom so you can get a sense of everything that goes into the SCORE and into the profile, and how we share information about Needham and kind of the strengths of our programs and what we offer to the school, so they can understand us better, as well as certain courses that are strange that they would have to learn, like Greater Boston Project. We have a description of that. Braver Newer World, we have a description of that. So it's so they would have, often reps don't know what that means, and why is it, it's a double block, and what does that mean for a school? So we're sharing kind of course specific information at times as well. So there's a question, and I can answer. Oh, there's one about if the student doesn't have a lot of extracurricular activities, how do they set themselves apart? Whether it's, maybe they're demonstrating like the strength through their academic performance. I guess that's a holistic review. Someone's asking if not a lot of outside stuff, how does that impact their evaluation? But they might be a strong student. Anybody?
One thought comes to mind is that there's still time. Like, you have time senior year to perhaps get involved in a number of clubs, or it could be a part-time job, something on the side that you could do to add to your extracurricular. So it's not over. You still have time to add that to your application. And then the other thing I'll stress is that different schools have different things that they're looking for. So there could be a wide variety of schools that extracurriculars may not be an incredible emphasis. So just keep that in mind as well.
And I would just say there are 10 spaces on the common application for activities, and a student's job is not to fill that up. If you have 3 that mean a lot to you and that you spend time doing, that is just as important to us as someone who does 10, but sort of spreads themselves more thinly. So as Kenny said, there's no right way to do it.
And also, we're not just looking for the traditional extracurriculars you may think of in terms of school-related activities. If you have a job, that is something we want to know about. If you are helping care for younger siblings or other older adults in your family, that's important. Do you have a strong religious community that you are spending a lot of time working with? Those are all things that add to our understanding of you and really, truly do have value to us.
Thank you. A question about early decision and early action and the advantages that sometimes we see kind of rather staggering differences in percentage of acceptances between early decision and regular, or even early decision and early action. Can you talk about, I guess for the 2 schools that have early decision, how that comes to be and how you look at early decision versus regular, and maybe Rachel or UMass's early action? Is there an advantage to early action versus regular at UMass? So maybe, Kenny, do you want to start with early decision at Syracuse?
Yeah, as far as our review and like percentages, our early decision rate for admission is higher, but it's slight. It's less than 10% of a difference between students who apply through early decision versus students who apply through regular. So it's not an incredibly significant statistical advantage. Slightly higher, but actually pretty close than maybe students might think.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the first thing to understand is just the difference between early decision and early action. And it actually is going to answer a question that I noticed came up later too. That early decision is binding. So that means that if you apply under an early decision plan and you are offered admission, you are expected to withdraw your applications to other colleges. So for the family that was asking about, my daughter says she can only apply to one early decision school, she's exactly right. Early action gives more options, and I'll let Rachel explain that. But yeah, I would say also for us, we have a slight increase in our admit rate for early decision, but not huge as you might find at other places. And this is where data is your friend. You can ask that exactly. You can ask a college, about the difference between the admit rates. And the other important question to ask is what percentage of your class comes in through an early decision program? If they're taking 60 to 70% of their students, then of course it's going to be an advantage. If it's 40%, something like that, it's less so.
Thank you.
In terms of early action, so yes, you can apply to as many early action schools. Well, that's not true. Common App will limit you to 20. Do not call and ask how to submit your 21st application to UMass Amherst. No, just don't do that. That being said, the early action allows you to have a decision earlier. In terms of our acceptance rates, we do see a higher acceptance rate in early action versus regular decision. But honestly, that really comes down to the quality of the applicant who is turning in their application earlier. Think of that student who is getting their assignment done on time or early. That's the person that we typically see. In terms of how we read, though, it is very much the same between the two. I think I would encourage students who are looking at our more selective majors, nursing, computer science, and Eisenberg School of Business, that they look at early action because the quality of the student is so high that we are filling that bin up more quickly. We always save additional spaces for the spring applicants, those regular decisions as well. But we do see that it's an advantage for students who are looking at those specific majors.
Thank you. And I would touch also, there's some schools have priority applications for like scholarship consideration. So it doesn't neatly fall into like early action or early decision, but they still might say, get your application in by December 1st if you want to be considered for a scholarship. So work with your school counselors. Definitely check out the details on the college's website about all the admissions plans they have. And we can help navigate that process as well. There's a question about tech. That's more for me. Tech is maybe it's informative for our panelists too. So the Education Collaborative is a group of towns that have pooled resources. And so Needham is represented in that group, and they hold fairs. They're helpful in offering summer internships and stuff like that. So they have a website. I think it's the Education Collaborative. I think that's the correct C word on that one. So we have that.
I'm going to plug the
Yep.
Stockbridge School for Agriculture. I cannot plug it enough. It is one of the top ranked agriculture programs in the United States and the world. It has amazing programs, both associates and bachelor's degrees. So it's the only school that in UMass that offers the associate degrees. They like to brag that they've actually graduated more billionaires or more millionaires, I'm sorry, than any other major on campus. And they offer things beyond farming. Turf grass management is one of the most popular and has a nearly 100% employment rate following graduation. There's work with trees. There's all sorts of great opportunities for students. So I encourage you to consider that. It's clearly a favorite of mine. So that was a shameless plug.
Fabulous. A great question just came in. Can each of you and your institutions share an example of a silly or avoidable mistake you see on applications, or just in general, any like helpful warnings to students to be mindful of in the process, maybe with social media or through their application? So words of advice on things to avoid. Do you want to start, Kenny?
Yeah, sure. Social media, yes. Be mindful of what you're doing, what you're posting. I have seen admission decisions be pulled based off of information that's been placed on via social media, unfortunately. The other one that comes to mind are essays and seeing other schools' names within either the main essay or the supplemental essay. You know, UConn, Georgetown, great schools, but it's not Syracuse. So when you're filling out, making sure that that's corrected when you're applying to multiple schools.
I will say parents are just as guilty of that. I received just last week an email from a parent asking a question because Boston University is their daughter's top choice. Am I holding that against them? No, but it is a human error. And so that communication though is filed into that file forever. So it applies across the ages.
I think it extends. I mean, many colleges ask the question, what about our college appeals to you? And I absolutely agree about for us, there's nothing more demoralizing than seeing like, and this is why MIT is where I want to go. But it's also true about details, about, you don't have to do really deep, detailed research to answer these questions. But, I used to work at Sarah Lawrence College for 15 years, and we'd have students who said, I always wanted to go to a women's college. Well, that's fantastic. But Sarah Lawrence has been co-ed since 1969. So making sure that the easily accessible details are correct.
Great, thanks. And this is not, I think some of this advice is not just in the application process, it's kind of after the acceptance. We've seen some things happen on social media and some of the groups and some posts that have led to students at our school, admissions offices reaching out to them about their post and having to speak to and questioning whether an acceptance gets taken away based on some of the posts. So just those are some not just silly mistakes, but there are some, just be very careful of how you manage what's out there. manage what's out there online. So we're getting near the end, and I don't see any additional questions coming in, and I don't want to keep making up my own. So any final words of wisdom as we close out this this evening? Anybody want to jump in?
There's a song called by Walk the Moon called One Foot. It's just one foot in front of the other. There's a lot to do in this process. There's a checklist after multiple things, deadlines. That's another thing to make sure that you are aware of, are all the different deadlines. But I think there's just so much to do that it can become overwhelming. So just making sure that you're organized and breathe through this process and just taking things one at a time, one foot in front of the other.
And I would add, this for most students, many students, this is going to be the most important decision they're going to make in their short lives so far. But if they make the wrong one, then you transfer. It is really not a big deal, even if you know, students end up where they belong. So this is not a be all end all. There are options.
And this season right now that we are in is the dating season, right? You're getting to know us, we're getting to know you. Don't fall in love until sometime in the spring. When you have those letters of decision, you have your financial aid packages, and you can really make a decision as to where you see yourself moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to close with my own piece of advice. So I'd say just have open conversations with your students about what your expectations are as well in this process, and hopefully they're being open with you about it, and you're kind of sharing that. I grew up in Arlington, Mass, and my parents wanted me to stay kind of close to home, and I expressed interest in a school in Indiana. So they said, I'll show him. We're going to drive 18 hours, and he's going to feel the pain of driving 18 hours to Indiana every time he goes out to that school. So what I did is I slept for 16 hours of that ride, and I was like, this is totally fine. So Indiana is where I ended up going to, I went to school in Indiana for 4 years. Just sleep on the ride. It's all good. So, well, thank you everyone for for the families for joining us and for allowing us to work with your children and you throughout this process. And once again, thank you to Kenny, Tira, and Rachel for sharing your wisdom and for spending your valuable time with us this evening. It was fabulous to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Good night, everyone.